Hello everyone, I know it's been a while, but that's besides the point. Today we're going to be discussing what defines the Apex Legends meta, so essentially the reasons each character is good, the reasons why some come in and out of meta despite not really being changed, and more. This video is to be taken more in an ALGS context, as realistically in pubs and ranked, pretty much all characters are viable if you're good enough at the core aspects of the game, but in ALGS, no matter how good you are, it's pretty impossible to be successful on certain characters. Anyway, the first reason and most important reason, in my opinion, for what makes good characters good is their versatility. Basically, what that means is the character's ability to be useful in as many scenarios as possible. Is this character good for straight up 3v3s? How about when you're at a disadvantage, like on a specific terrain? Meaning, could they be useful when you're on low ground and high ground? Are they good at close and long range? Can they be used to close distances? Can they be used to rotate? Are they good at holding a position? Can they be used while playing edge? What about while playing zone? These are just some of the questions pros ask while assessing what characters are good. When you look at a character like Bang, you can answer yes to all of those questions, which makes it make sense why she's been a staple in the meta as of late. Now, you may be asking, well, how is it that she's so good right now and wasn't used for years despite being pretty much untouched? There's an answer to that question, which I'll get to in a few minutes. Continuing on with the point about the questions people ask themselves though, it's important to note that the answer to all of these questions doesn't have to be yes. Caustic is a character that obviously doesn't do anything at long range, but he's one of the highest picked legends across all regions right now. Why? Because he's the best character at his vital role of being a controller. Being able to scan zone and hold positions are some of the most important aspects of the game, and Caustic is simply the best at it right now in most people's opinion. So when you see a new character release or a new character pop in and out of the meta, ask yourself these questions. Versatility also ties into my next point, which is usefulness throughout the game. I know there's a specific term for it that people use, but it's kind of slipping my mind right now, so that's how we're going to refer to it. Some characters are most useful off spawn, others peak during the mid game, and other characters are at the peak of their powers in the end game. When you realize that, under most circumstances, you don't want to pick a character that is only useful during one part of the game. To better illustrate this point, I think we can look at Fuse as a perfect example of this. Fuse is potentially one of the strongest legends in the game in very late game situations, yet absolutely nobody plays him. Why? Because he's almost entirely useless at every other point in the game, besides maybe contests. But even with contesting nowadays, you'd pick a conduit over a Fuse anyway. An example of a character that shines at all times in the game is Horizon. She's been a relevant part of the meta for nearly 2 years, largely due to these points. Her tactical is incredibly useful in all stages of the game, from contests to mid-game fights to endgames. Her tactical can easily provide immense value, not only to herself, but to her teammate. Her ultimate is also solid in almost all types of fights. You can make a similar point about Blood and Bang, both of which have abilities that you can find good value from at any point in the game. I wouldn't say that Caustic is necessarily an outlier in this category, but he definitely isn't as useful early game as he is in late game. He still maintains his place in the meta though, considering that he is the best beacon scan character in the game. That title used to be held by Catalyst, who actually was also incredibly useful off spawn, as well as in endgame, but with her recent massive nerfs, she simply can't keep up anymore. But anyway, that's another huge determiner for a character's viability in the meta. Can they be useful at all points in the game? Ask yourself that. The third determiner, and I think also the most overlooked by casual Apex fans, is the map. Not all legends are as useful as they are on some maps compared to others. Keeping up with our theme of talking about relevant characters in the meta, I think Caustic is the best example of a character like this by far. Despite Caustic's prevalence and importance on World's Edge, I believe he is significantly less vital on Stormpoint, especially on more edge POIs. World's Edge is not only a more building-based map than Stormpoint, but it also has significantly smaller choke points, tunnels, and things like that are much easier to hold using Caustic. Additionally, when you land at a more edge POI, you're not going to get priority into any of the zone spots anyway, so his beacon scan is just a tad bit less useful. Despite this, a lot of teams still run Caustic on Stormpoint, which in my opinion is a misstep. However, if teams want to play more passively, then I guess that makes sense. But I'd honestly pick like a Watson if you wanted to play more passively on Stormpoint. If you guys don't know yet, I'm sort of like a Watson truther, so you may hear me talk a lot about her on this channel. Speaking of that, If you're enjoying this video and like ALGS content, like and subscribe for more in the future. Anyway, when you're seeing a new character release or a new season update happen, ask yourself, in what terrain/topographical situations would this character work well in? Do they only operate well in buildings? Do they have abilities that require some sort of sky clearance, like Valk and Bang? Remember, you can apply these sorts of questions to your own games, even if they're not on the competitive maps. With the new map District allegedly coming in Season 22, which is also supposedly building based like World's Edge, you'll be able to ask yourself these questions and figure out the meta for yourself. The last determiner that I'm going to talk about in this video is the most obvious one, buffs and nerfs. Now, it's so obvious, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about characters getting nerfed and buffed specifically. However, there's an important point I want to make about it that I feel like answers a question that I see often from casual Apex fans. Every so often, we'll see characters that haven't been touched in a while quickly become staples in the meta, and I'll often see people ask, X character hasn't been changed in a year. Why are they good all of a sudden? There's two answers for this. Either the Apex community just didn't know ball and they weren't being experimental enough, or other characters got nerfed that now make a different character much better. In my immediate memory, the first option only really happened with Seer and Horizon. Why the Apex community was stupid enough to think that they sucked, I have no idea. I only started playing the game about a month before Furia did what they did with them, but to me, it honestly makes no sense why people didn't know that they were OP. That's besides the point. The most recent scenario has been characters getting nerfed, which makes a different one better. The two best examples of this are Caustic and Bangalore. I touched on it a bit with Caustic earlier, but with seeing how strong Catalyst was in previous seasons, it really made no sense to have a controller character other than her. But with her being nerfed into the ground recently, Caustic has become the best controller by default, therefore stamping himself into the meta. And with Bang, I actually wrote a comment about this before, so I'm just gonna read that. Before evacs and cat meta, basically every team chose Valk, so that was already one pick locked in. Seer was so stupidly broken, so that was two picks locked in. Horizon was also extremely broken and matched with Seer so perfectly that it just made sense for that to be the three. Seer's place in the meta also would render Bang useless in a lot of scenarios, considering that Seer directly counters Bang smokes at a rate much higher than Bloodhound does now. So basically, because Seer was so broken, it made no sense to have a Bang, because what's the point of the smokes if every other team in the lobby can see straight through them? For a quick review, let's go over the main points again in defining the ALGS meta. First, a legend's versatility is put into question. Also, their usefulness throughout the game is looked at. In addition, the map is considered. And finally, buffs and nerfs of that character themselves and of other characters are considered. Every time a new update drops, I want you guys to consider these aspects to see if the current meta should stay the same or shift based on the parameters of the update. Hopefully you all learned something from this video. I know I've said this before, but I'm going to try to be more consistent with uploading. So if you're interested in learning more about competitive Apex and why pro players do the things they do, subscribe to the channel. By the way, if you're wondering where I've been for like the last 2 months, I honestly haven't really been able to watch as much comp as I'd like in order to make videos on it. But even then, I've made 2 videos that I've actually scrapped during this hiatus. So yeah, that's where I've been. But anyway, see you guys in the next one.